Okay, now I'm going to switch into differing historical opinions, and I know Dan knows this. A guy named Frank Hammett, and if you ever knew of Frank's Dive Shop in Riviera Beach at the base of the Blue Heron Boulevard Bridge, Frank was a major killer of Goliath groupers. And then his colleague is a good friend of mine. I knew Frank, but I wasn't like real friends with him. His name's Kenny Rosinas, and when he was 16 years old, he was out there with Frank killing Goliath groupers. So here's a difference of opinion. This is a charter boat captain on the West Coast. They've pretty much taken over the reefs, says Ron Rincones. And my belief is that they far exceed the numbers now than they did in the 1950s and 60s. So Kenny, who's got a very good memory, he says,
I'm Kenny Rosinas. I'm 60 years old, and I've been fishing here in Palm Beach for at least 50 years. I got my first boat when I was 10 years old, started spearfishing and fishing with a rod and reel, but at the same time.
Back then, they would kill 5 to 10 Goliaths a day, along with 4 or 5 other boats doing the same. As many as 500,000 pounds of Goliaths were killed a year with an average live weight of 300 pounds. That adds up to 1,600 fish a year. And then it would just be replaced and replaced. It seemed like maybe the elephants in Africa or the rhinos or whatever. It seemed like it was an unlimited resource.
The size of the fish that we captured the fish would mostly be a 300-pound live weight, which would come out to about a 200-pound clean fish, something like that. I would capture between 5 to 10 fish a day, depending on whether I went on 1 or 2 trips. Along with that, there were 4 or 5 other boats doing the same thing. Some of my years, on a good year, we'd get 100,000 pounds of fish in a year. So that could be as many as 500,000 pounds were killed in the Hope Sound and Jupiter and Palm Beach area in 1 year.
My name is Frank Hammett. I was born and raised here in West Palm Beach. I'm 78 years old now, and I started diving before Sea Hunt and all those shows were on, and I used to marvel at some of the things that they did. When the Jewfish were here, you could go out off West Palm Beach and dive down on any reef that was out there, and you could see anywhere from 6 to 10 Jewfish under every ledge that we came to. Everywhere that there was a ledge that one could get under, there was one there.
Goliath groupers, they create biodiversity. One of the theories behind that is that, they got those big fan tails and they move a lot. They're excavators, they move. When the Anna Cecilia was first put down, I videotaped the Goliath groupers moving the dirt. And then a hurricane came through and pushed it 100 feet into the hole where the dirt was moved. And the scouring activity was going on as well from the current. But Goliath groupers are tremendous excavators of sand. They create habitat. And what this slide is saying is that when there's more Goliath grouper, there's more snapper and other fish species. So one of the major things that has to happen with educating fishermen, whether they're spear fishermen or they're hook and line fishermen, is that, maybe the Goliath grouper isn't such a bad animal to have. And diet's an important part of it, because they all think that they're so big they have to be eating everything in sight. But I'll let Chris go into that.
Back in the 50s also, I used to dive off Hope Sound, and they had a wreck on the beach at Hope Sound, and the netters would catch their nets on the wreckage, and so I went down there, and that's where I found there were a lot of Jewfish there. But also the grouper were there. Not only the big schools of Jewfish were in these wrecks that were there, but there were a lot of big gray grouper were there. And so I used to get a little of both. In the 80s, the Jewfish had dwindled down to where you couldn't find any to shoot. And this friend of mine asked me if I would loan him my film that showed what the population had dwindled down to, and they were going to get some legislation to stop people from taking them. So I told him yes, and I loaned him my film, and he was successful in getting legislation passed banning all taking of Jewfish, period. You couldn't have them in your possession. If you got caught with a Jewfish in your possession, you were in trouble, whether you speared it, power hitted it, or whatever. You're just not allowed to have it in your boat. So that was a good thing, and we got that done, and that kind of saved the Jewfish. I think that we should probably wait until they do some more studies and find out how much they have come back and how substantial their growth back is, to make sure that we don't just wipe them all out and find out that that was a dumb thing to do.